I'm ready to hurt again, is what every Muv Luv fan said when they saw the localization announcement for Photonflowers. In this supplementary game, you'll further explore the worlds of both Muv Luv Extra and Muv Luv Alternative with various side stories and spin-offs. Now, before I proceed, I want to warn you that this video will assume you've played the previous games from the main series, and since some elements in Photonflowers revolve around some pretty big plot details, there most definitely will be spoilers for them in this video. On the side of Extra, we've got about 9 hours of content spread across 7 stories. Most of these stories are fairly short and uneventful, usually just a small story set before Extra from the perspective of the various females in the series. They're all generally just a fun peek into the thoughts of those characters that would otherwise go unspoken. While nothing truly eventful happens in them, it does feel rather nice for the sake of character development to see the fleshing out of the thought processes that drive them, especially with characters like Iamine and Class Rep, who are often very standoffish. But personally, I found the most noteworthy of these was to see the thought process of Sumika and how she feels about the self-involved way Taku treats her. Beyond these short stories, the highlight and the majority of the playtime for the extra content comes from the Before the Cherry Blossoms Bloom after episode. Many visual novels love to end on the note of the two characters finally getting together, but have you ever wondered what the future might look like for the characters in these scenarios? Well, this story offers exactly that. This is the only story set after the game, and like Alternative, it continues on from the Sumika route, placing emphasis on the troubling transition from friends to lovers and their looming graduation. One thing that Alternative did really well was show the character development of Taku as he faced ordeal after ordeal. Gradually, he turned into a respectable man. But in the case of this extra timeline, he's still that childish boy who has little regard for the feelings of others. The main exploration of this after episode is about the immature side of him and the need to grow up with the ever-increasing exposure to adulthood with his first proper relationship and the end of school life. It's not really a necessary story. After all, the events of Alternative make the nature of this story impossible to exist. But if you think of it in terms of Extra being its own game, this story is kind of like the ending that it needed. It's a nice conclusive ending that tells you where characters are heading in life, gives Taku a much needed wake up call, and ultimately provides an almost nostalgic finale that gives everyone a share of the spotlight. I guarantee you won't be able to come out of this one without reflecting on your own graduation and the friends you might no longer see. But I'm sure many of you aren't here to hear about Extra, right? You want to hear about the alternative stories. Unfortunately, in a case I never thought would come to be, I actually preferred the extra side of the game to the alternative, unlike the main games. There's one pretty basic reason for this. Alternative doesn't feature the main cast. The alternative side gave me about 10 hours worth of content spread across 5 stories. Even though the main cast doesn't make more than the occasional appearance, the storytelling abilities are still present in Alternative, but mostly in a character developing capacity. My main complaint with these stories is that they're mostly just spin-offs featuring characters that have little to no relation to the main game, like revolving around a sibling of one of the characters from Total Eclipse, or the little sister of Captain Usami following Operation 21st. It's not that there's anything inherently wrong with these stories, don't get me wrong, it's just that I'd much rather be seeing different perspectives to events or extended endings to Alternative, similar to what Extra got. But that's not to say there's nothing of relation in this side of the game. The two noteworthy stories in this case for me were Atonement, a story that revolves around Marimo in the days of her training where she had to overcome the sexist views of the military that had not yet resorted to drafting women yet, and Confessions, a story following Captain Usami and her squad during training as she struggles to make it through Marimo's frankly brutal boot camp while learning a lot about who she is and what drives her to be what she wants to be. While these characters might not be part of the core cast so much, they're definitely relevant enough to be more than welcome for the sake of character development in the long run. It definitely gives the reader a whole new perspective to consider and makes their deaths in Alternative feel so much more real and upsetting. Like that was possible. Overall, I wouldn't say Muv Luv Photonflowers is entirely necessary for the sake of the story, but it does add a tremendous amount of value and is absolutely a necessity for any Muv Luv fan, because, let's face it, we're all desperate for something new, and there's nothing in this game that fails to live up to those wishes. I never would have expected to see a Muv Luv game where I enjoyed the extra content more than the alternative, and frankly I'm a little disappointed with that, but considering the extra stories were actually rather good this time around and had the advantage of being solely focused on the main cast, that shouldn't be considered much of a criticism on the alternative stories. I think the best way to sum it up is that this is purely a supplement to the main series. It adds a lot of value to many aspects and enhances the experience, but it is by all counts optional.